bad. Good.
Welcome everyone to season 4, episode 127 of the Premier Pod. I'm your host Yash Bika, joined by my co-host Tyler Chan. And this episode, kind of a shorter one in terms of our rundown, but there are some big talking points we have going into this episode. We are in the middle of an international break. I know, sad. Seems like the international break always comes at the worst times when the club season is heating up, but it just is what it is when it comes to those international breaks. But to get things started, we have the biggest game of this past weekend, which was Liverpool versus Manchester City, lived up to the hype into a 2-2 draw, an exciting 2-2 draw because all the goals, I believe, came in the second half. Yeah, all goals came in the second half. And it was phenomenal. We had it was a 2-2 draw, 4 goals scored, world-class goal from Mohamed Salah, drama on both ends. Pep Guardiola, going through all the emotions during the sidelines. You had Jurgen Klopp versus Pep. It was a classic Pep versus Klopp rivalry that we've kind of been gotten used to, I would say, in the Premier League these past couple seasons, especially at the heights that Liverpool and Manchester City have kind of set in the Premier League for past 4 or 5 seasons. And heck, I would even say since Klopp has entered the league and since Pep has entered the league, they've both kind of been at the forefront of revolutionizing the Premier League and also bringing it to the new heights that it's been set. So I think they've shown that they have produced some exciting matchups, but this matchup was a really good one.
It kind of reminded me of like the Cleveland Cavaliers versus Golden State Warriors kind of rivalry from the NBA. Like it didn't last as long, obviously, because like Chelsea just snuck in there last season for the Champions League at least. But this matchup, it's always the one that kind of you mark on your calendars. It's like, all right, this is basically verse for second for most of the past 5 or 6 seasons, where it's like, all right, this is going to be the big match between the tactical geniuses of Pep Guardiola and Jurgen Klopp. But this game, there was a few changes to the lineups that I did take note of, where James Milner came in for an injured Trent Alexander-Arnold. Trent also, so far, he's like one of the most creative players statistically. Like he has the most chances created, most passes played into the box for chance created, like most uh, crosses successful into the box, like things like that. And he's a right back, so kind of losing that spark was a big hit. And then also having James Milner having to guard Phil Foden, De Bruyne on that right side of the Liverpool defense was kind of a big ask. But I mean, he kind of pulled through for most of the game, and it ended up being a 2-2, which was a lot more open than I thought it would be, just because I know both teams, they had some vulnerabilities going into this game, where it could be a game where it was like a complete shutout, like a 0-0, which was what I think I was thinking for last week's prediction. But this week it was more of a open 2-2, and it kind of showed that this game, which players are kind of stepping up in terms of being like world class, because I feel like certain points of this game, like Salah, Mane, they kind of, that Man City defense kind of stepped back, just kind of let them do their thing, and they kind of gave them the respect that they deserved. Where it's just like, all right, well, if you actually are world class, show me why. And then Salah dropped 3 players in that one like famous goal from this game, where he basically received the ball at the top of the box, juked 3 players in a row, and then hit it with his right foot. And that goal might be goal of the year. Honestly, it was like insane. If his Puskas goal against Everton could be a Puskas goal, this is better than that. So this better be up there, at least in terms of top 3 for goal of the year. But this rivalry kind of really showed that, like, it kind of brings out the most of these world class players, because like they got to step up. It's not going to be like versus Southampton, where it's like, all right, we're just gonna hopefully win 1-0, and then maybe something good happens. Like this game, like every single player had to step up. So I don't know. It's we kind of take it for granted these days, and it was kind of weird to see like certain players coming into that rivalry match, like Jack Grealish, Phil Foden, and actually have kind of like the bigger impacts to the reigns for at least the Man City side. Before, you used to be used to seeing a Sergio Aguero or like a Mahrez kind of being in that front and kind of wreaking havoc. But I feel like this time that Man City front was also just so different. Having Gabriel Jesus on the right wing too. So I don't know. It's just kind of weird to see. But in terms of, I would say this result, were you surprised by anything? Any like surprise changes or any kind of surprise result that you saw from this? Because besides that, James Milner playing at right back, which is kind of expected due to the injury, and also just Curtis Jones, which I'll touch on in a bit, getting his start as well. Anything from your side that you saw?
Yeah, I thought that with the James Milner one was interesting because he did have a chance of potentially getting a red card in the second half when there was a challenge on Bernardo Silva, which he did stick out his leg and Bernardo did make contact with it. And you had differing opinions from everyone whether it was deserved a second yellow where he could have got sent off. Some people were like, it's a bit harsh, but there's definitely up there that he could have been sent off. And I think Klopp made the right decision of yanking him after that and not taking the chance because he was in a lot of sense. I know he kind of put in, he had to just go in there because of Trent's injury, but he was getting cooked by the likes of Phil Foden and Bernardo Silva, kind of making a meal out of it in terms of just getting the best out of him. And that just, comes unfortunately with Milner's age. But I wanted to bring up a couple of points. There was the talk of Jack Grealish. He did start this game, and obviously he is Manchester City's biggest buy of the summer, £100 million from Aston Villa. Most expensive British, I believe, most expensive British player ever, transfer wise. But what's interesting is I heard a lot of conversation about his impact with the team, and he does have a couple goals and a couple assists, in the Champions League and in the Premier League, but in terms of really lighting up Manchester City, he hasn't really done that or shown that just yet. And there was some interesting conversation I saw on Twitter that I would say I have to agree with. They were comparing the like of Jack Grealish, his type of player profile. He's kind of the player that is a big fish in a small pond, but he's a big fish in a small pond type of player, but he is not very effective when he is I would say a big player in a big pond, if that makes sense. So I would say compared to Wilfred Zaha, you know how for so many years you could have listened to this podcast or other people where it's like, why isn't Wilfred Zaha made the move to, a big six club? Like, he has the talent, he showcases it each and every week. He's got the flair, he's got the finish, he's got like everything you need. But then when you look at his game and you kind of look deeper into it, Wilfred Zaha, the reason he is so successful is because the team is built around Wilfred Zaha, where everybody just feeds Zaha the ball 24/7. Like, when you play Palace and Zaha's in the team, he's going to be force fed the ball. He's going to be allowed to cook and do his own thing. And really, the manager or the other players aren't going to stop him from doing that because they know he's the best player on the team. I feel like Jack Grealish kind of has that same problem because at Aston Villa, yeah, they had the likes of, John McGinn, they had Ollie Watkins, they had, a couple other players that could create, but really, Jack Grealish was the main creator in terms of providing the creativity, the finishing ability, providing that little scare factor from Aston Villa, and that was because he was force fed the ball every time they got the ball. Constantly getting the ball. He was like the most fouled player, I believe, last year, and now this season. Now that he's at Manchester City, yeah, there's going to be a bit of adjustment, but I think that will actually harm the usefulness of Jack Grealish because he is now in a position where Phil Foden, in a lot of ways, kind of plays a similar role of Jack Grealish, where he can play out in the wing and in the center attacking midfielder position. But now Grealish is in a team that has the likes of Kevin De Bruyne, Phil Foden, Riyad Mahrez, Gabriel Jesus, where he's like I would say Jack Grealish is not necessarily he's not the number one option anymore. And now that you're not the number one option, how does your game adjust in terms of not being used to getting fed the ball a lot of the time? So and we've seen that his impact in terms of his goals and assists hasn't been there. And I think, unfortunately, I feel like that might be a pattern for the rest of the season. I don't think, the type of player profile he is, I don't know if he's really going to thrive in an area or in a team where he's not being force fed the ball or where he's not the number one guy in terms of creating everything. And in a lot of ways, I feel like maybe Manchester City kind of wasted that money. They haven't done that a lot in recent years, but I feel like in this sense, I feel like they've probably wasted that money because just the way Jack Grealish plays, I don't think you're going to get the best out of him in a Manchester City shirt. Unfortunately, just because of the way he plays and the way he wants the ball all the time. And unfortunately, at City, you're not going to be the number one option when Kevin De Bruyne is there. And heck, you could make the argument that Phil Foden is a better number two option than Jack Grealish. So it's kind of my interesting take that I saw on Jack Grealish, which I would say I have to agree with.
I also agree, just because if you think about it as well, from this actual game, there were times Phil Foden slid into the middle and took over for Grealish's position, and then Grealish went back to left wing at times because that's where he's more comfortable. And also for that point where he brought up with Zaha, when he went to Manchester United, Wilfred Zaha, really early on in his career. Granted, it was kind of early, but
Hmm.
he didn't really thrive as much as people were expecting him to. Like it was like a Zaha versus Raheem Sterling rivalry for the longest time, where it's like, oh, who's going to be the better developed player? And then ultimately it became Sterling. But I mean, that's to say because Zaha kind of prefers to be in this position where he is like the main man. Like at Crystal Palace, he's like the best player on the team, and the team kind of thrives around that because they put all their eggs in that Zaha basket, and he thrives from it. But when you put him in an environment where he plays for the England national team or he plays for Manchester United, where he's not the main man, then he doesn't really work out as much. He is that big fish in a lake rather than a big pond or a small little pond, kind of things like that. So I mean, I think that's kind of like the same with Grealish, where he's also still kind of trying to figure out his footing. Even for that England national team in the
Yeah,
Euros this past summer, Jack Grealish at times didn't even start. They would just sub
yeah,
him in as a super sub, even though he had all this acclaim. It's like, oh, he's gonna be the next big thing. He's gonna be
yeah.
like the
I
big
mean,
money move.
Like the English fans, they love Jack Grealish. Like they
Hmm.
absolutely adore him. But I agree with you. It's like, how do you fit him in the team? Because yeah, you could play him as a winger, but he doesn't necessarily have the pace of a Marcus Rashford. I mean, he didn't really play that much, but a Raheem Sterling in the England national side, and then for Manchester City, it I don't know. I always had puzzling thoughts about this transfer just to begin with because I thought Phil Foden is the same type of player profile of Jack Grealish, where small, very technical on the ball, can play out in the wing, can play as a center attacking midfielder, has a good vision on him, can finish. I just felt like they were just too similar. And it's just like, why would you spend 100 mil when you already have this homegrown player that you've built and developed? To me, it was just kind of, it didn't make sense.
I feel like at times, I think we mentioned this before around when we're asking, it's like, why isn't Man City going in for Kane? Like they need Kane, they need
Yeah.
a striker, and then it's like, oh, we'll just get another left winger, another creative player. It's like, oh, okay. I think they really just did it mostly just to say, it's like, all right, now no one else can have him. We have him now, so no one else. Well, like we won't have to face him, which is, I guess, a strategic move in itself too. Where it's like now they don't have to worry about having to face Jack Grealish if he went
Hmm.
to Men's United or if he went to Tottenham or something
Yeah.
or Chelsea probably.
Yeah.
But I would say for this, I think it's going to take a little bit of time too, just for Jack Grealish. Like I was surprised that he also got the start so quickly. I knew
Hmm.
that he probably would have to just because he's worth
Yeah. The
so much
price
money.
tag.
It's like how are you going to buy him and then just put him on the bench? That was also I think one of our old topics too. Is like, are we actually going to have a team buy a player just to ride the pine? It's like probably
Hmm.
not, because if you think about it as well, this is something I kind of thought about over the weekend where when you're on Twitter or when you're on social media like Instagram and you see the comments, it's like, oh, why aren't you playing this player? This player is so much better than the player is starting, things like that. But it's like you realize the player that is starting, maybe like a Jack Grealish, which is worth £100 million, and they can't play someone who. Let's see just their bench right now. It's like if say they had their bench and then you wanted to say they to start Mahrez, who was 50 million at the time when I believe he was bought from Leicester. It's like, well, if you think about it, every minute a player plays is like $1 spent on a player getting minutes, because like every single time a team plays in that 90 minutes, it's like how much is it per minute that a player passes the ball, takes a shot, makes a decision, like gets a red card, something like that, because all these decisions ultimately are like a dollar amount. And for Jack Grealish, because his price tag was like £100 million, every minute spent on the bench is like, dang, look at all that money just sitting there, just
Yeah.
rotting. Whereas when he's on the pitch, it's like, all right, every pass he makes, every shot he takes, every chances he creates, every turnover he makes, at least it goes towards 100 million that we spent. So for Mares in this case, it's like, well, you already got some money out of him. It's like it might be a tactical decision as well at times, but ultimately, I feel like there's a slight monetary reason for why Jack Grealish is getting all this playing time right now, because it's just like he's £100 million
Yeah.
transfer. It's like you can't just keep him on the bench, especially in a big game like this too. It's like people who are Manchester City fans that are neutrals just want to see this man play, because this is what they paid for. So it's like the big blockbuster move. It's the Jumanji of of the Premier League era. I'm trying to think of like other big movies that like The Rock was in, like things like that. Just like has like a movie star in it or some up and coming star,
Yeah.
because this is like the equivalent. So that's why they have them. But
Yeah, I
sometimes they're not really just fitting in.
yeah, I agree. And his age, I believe he's 25 or 26, but you know, not to say that he's at an age where he can't really develop anymore in terms of being a more proficient player that can develop in this style. I think if there's a manager that can transform him into a, I wouldn't say necessarily a better team player, but a player that can adapt to this situation would probably be Pep Guardiola. And we've seen that he's done that with multiple players in the past. I still think he has time to do that, but I guess in the early stages, it doesn't look the most likely that it's going to happen just because of the way he plays. I'm hoping that he at least turns it around because I do like Jack Grealish, but a very interesting observation. But one other thing I had from, I guess, this game that I was seeing was the talk of Mohamed Salah, not because of his world class goal. It was a really great goal. I have to give it to him for that. It was a fantastic goal. But Klopp was saying that after the game, it was a goal that Liverpool fans and supporters will remember for a very, very long time. But also, he mentioned that um, if Messi or Ronaldo scores that goal, you know, immediately you say that player is world class, even though we already know both of those players are world class. But then Klopp basically said that point or brought up that point because he wanted to mention that Mohamed Salah scores that goal because he is world class. And I know we had the discussion about Mohamed Salah. I guess a couple episodes ago when the FIFA ratings were revealed, when EA actually gave Mohamed Salah a downgrade, one overall downgrade, where he's now an 89 instead of a 90. And we thought that was interesting because as Tyler mentioned, the season before, he actually had a better goal turnout than the season before that, 2 seasons ago, where he actually got to the 90 overall upgrade. And I do agree. I think, even as a United fan, I thought going in, I thought he was basically what is it, underrated. I thought he deserved the 90 rating, and I'm not just speaking about this just for a FIFA aspect, but in terms of just the overall conversation, I think a lot of people brought up that he's easily, I guess in current form, he's in, I guess, the third best player in the world if you had Messi, Ronaldo, and then Mohamed Salah in that order, or whichever order you would have picked. In this current form, they said that Mohamed Salah is probably the best in the world right now, or in the conversation of the best in the world. So I thought that was really interesting because I think that is true. Because I know we joke about, other people like to joke about, oh, it's, he's a one season wonder, one season Mo, but realistically, ever since he's come to the Premier League, I mean, the guy, I think, has scored probably 20 plus goals each season. I feel like he has across
Mhm.
all competitions. It's just crazy. I think he's been in the golden boot race for the Premier League season. I think almost every season he's been here, which is just crazy because he's quote unquote a winger. Um, you know, yeah, he can at times miss a lot of the open chances and kind of fluff some of his, I would say, quote unquote easy chances, but he does make up for it for the sheer amount of volume that he just produces in terms of creating chances, scoring goals. And honestly, last season when Liverpool were really struggling, I felt like he was probably one of the more consistent players in terms of the front three, at least, where he was consistently providing goals or assists or creating chances. And yeah, coming from a United fan, I think Mohamed Salah definitely deserves his credit because I feel like he doesn't, sometimes at least, doesn't get the kind of the respect and love he deserves because I guess we've just gotten so used to him doing those type of things. But he's easily been one of the more consistent players across Europe for the past couple seasons by far. And it's just been kind of crazy to see,
Mhm.
seeing him doing it in the Premier League each game every season.
Those stats, and just if you were to take away the, I guess, pedigree and just history from every season, like if every season was just segmented to be its own isolated incident, its own isolated period, this season Salah has actually been doing better than, like a Messi or Ronaldo so far, just because Messi had a kind of a slow start at PSG, and Ronaldo at times, like he had a hot start and then it's kind of cooled down a little bit at Manchester United. And even Mbappe, like a lot of people getting Mbappe a little bit of hate just because he was like the cover boy of FIFA 22, and he got like a 91 rating or something, and people are like, man, that's a little overrated there just because he's cover boy. But for Salah, I feel like there's been talks even for him being in the race for Ballon d'Or, and you're starting to see some memes on Twitter. You're starting to see some memes on social media of just him chasing down the Ballon d'Or and things like that. And you haven't seen that kind of talks with him for a while. It's always been like, oh, it's if there's like a underdog kind of player going for that, it would probably be like Robert Lewandowski, or it'd probably be like that previous season before. I believe it was like 2 or 3 seasons ago. It was Luka Modric.
Yeah.
So this season, he's in the conversation. Like, although he's underrated, he's on everyone's ears. He's the talk of the town. Or it's like he might be able to do it this season if he keeps up this form. Although it's pretty early still. We just hit October not too long ago.
Yeah.
But if he can just keep this up, then he already has a head start, is what we're also saying. So I think Salah, despite the critics saying, it's like it'll eventually drop off. It'll eventually drop off. It's just something he's doing for the season, but next season it'll just be like, he turned into an average player, just 10 goals or something. But no, he's kind of proven everyone wrong. He's keeping that train moving. He's already at 6 goals, top goal scorer, golden boot race. So he is
And
Mo.
I know there was, as we were talking about Mohamed Salah and appreciating him, I think I did see some conversation from Liverpool fan accounts was that I guess the one area of concern was his contract. I think it's like running out soon, or I think he's on his final year or approaching his final year soon. And the conversation is, I believe he's at 30 years old right now. And now the conversation is, do Liverpool give him all the money he wants and extends it? Or that's kind of the tough decision because we've seen players, obviously Messi and Ronaldo at 30, beyond 30, just keep performing at a high level. Robert Lewandowski, I believe, is what, 32, 33, still performing
Mhm.
at a really high level. So I guess now in this modern age, it's not too common to see players drop off so dramatically when they hit 30, as long as they take care of the body, which it seems like Salah, takes good care of himself in terms of his physical well-being. But that's the interesting topic is like, do Liverpool just hand him all the money he wants and just hopes that you get a solid 5 years of world class Salah? Because like Arsenal did that with Aubameyang, and Aubameyang just poof has not been the same player since the new contract, and he was around that same age too. I believe he was like 31 when Arsenal decided to hand him the new contract and make him stay.
I think the Mo Salah contract, if I can remember just from memory, I think it's like 18 months away from expiring.
Hmm.
So he does need a new one. And if he were to get one, I would assume he would either get more money or at least stay the same because he's one of the most highly paid players in terms of salary. Um, I think they're waged, but in the Premier League. But he's one of the top up there, and he's the most paid player in Liverpool. And in the Premier League itself, I think he's top 10, if not sixth or fifth, because I know Manchester United pay their players a lot.
Yeah. So did
And
Man
then,
City, Man City,
yeah, Man City
Chelsea.
as well. But I think if I were them, I mean, obviously I'm not Fenway Sports Group, but if I were them, this is your golden goose. This is your top player. And if you take him out of the team, the main overall like quality of the team takes a dramatic hit. So I would try to keep him. And based on like modern medicine now and just physicality of just players, like we've historically seen, as you just mentioned, like 29, 30, it's like, oh, they're gonna be in the decline now. There they go. I mean, these days you're starting to see if they can keep it up, then usually you start to see that decline more around 33, 34, 35 now in terms of years old. So I think he can keep it up because he's one of the most fit players on the team. Like he's rarely injured. Like every season he plays almost every game. So I think you would have to give him the contract. But Fenway Sports Group, if John Henry, if you're listening, should pay him. Should pay Mo. He's basically the most important player of like the entire continent of Africa too, in terms of popularity and just influence for that whole area as well. So
Mm.
that's just my take. It's
Yeah,
like if FSG is listening.
LeBron James approves of Mo Salah too. So
Exactly. He's
you
the
got that.
king.
Yeah. So if the king approves, you got to hand him the contract. But overall, Liverpool, Man City was a great game. 2-2 draw. Jurgen Klopp versus Pep, another historic chapter written in that rivalry. Mohamed Salah world class goal. I mean, the game just lived up to everything that it that it was meant out to be. So it was a great game to watch. And moving on to Manchester United Everton, which ended in a 1-1 draw. Everton coming into Old Trafford. Rafa Benitez once again getting the one up on Manchester United. I feel like that guy's United's kryptonite. He always, whether it was for Liverpool, Newcastle, always had the perfect game plan to rattle United. And he had the perfect one for this one because even though Manchester United, they had some struggling performances against Villarreal, against West Ham, and just overall struggling as a team to perform the past couple games. They started out really hot in this game. They were creating tons of chances, weren't finishing them off, and they kind of had Everton on the ropes a little bit. But once again, the thing that has been letting Manchester United down this season, particularly, has been the transition defense, and especially with the goal they conceded against Everton. It was a corner that Manchester United had. United failed on the corner. The ball got spread out to Demarai Gray, and Fred, who was the man that was on charge of winning the ball back, couldn't win the ball back. And I think he had a couple of tries in terms of winning the ball back, but eventually essentially got brushed off the ball by Demarai Gray. And because of that, all the United players had to come cover for him. And that left space for Andros Townsend. Townsend scores, does a variation of the C celebration. And it was just overall, it just dampened the things and dampened the mood again, once again at Manchester United, because this season in particular, I know last season we did struggle with that a little bit, but this season we've just kind of been left really open when it comes to the transition defensive side of the ball. And I don't know if that has to do with, you know, lack of coaching, yeah, but also I feel like with the way we've been playing in terms of having all the attackers we have and trying to put them all onto one team, it's left us very vulnerable in the back. And specifically the midfielders, I would say the way we're trying to play, where we're trying to play with one holding midfielder or two, quote unquote, not really holding midfielders with McTominay and Fred with the what we call the McFred. Um, it just shows that that position is really lacking for Manchester United, and because of that, I was watching Manchester City versus Liverpool, and I was looking at the likes of Rodri and Fabinho, the way that they're able to just win the ball back so easily when the game goes on a counterattack. Let's say if City's going on a counterattack, Fabinho is just in the right place to win the ball back, or at least if not winning the ball back, at least stop them to the point where he can slow things down a little bit to get the other defenders on side. Same with Rodri, where he made that, I guess, game saving block for Manchester City at the end. And when you look at Fred and McTominay, in a lot of ways they're kind of lacking in terms of that awareness, the positional awareness, the wherewithal, and also the ability just to tackle the defender or tackle the offender, win the ball back, and just recycle play. And that's been the biggest worry, and that's kind of been the biggest plague of Manchester United for the past couple of seasons. Just that center defensive midfielder position has been such a letdown, and this game in particular just really showcased that weakness, because that goal that we conceded shouldn't have happened. We could have easily fouled him or could have easily won the ball back, but Demarai Gray pushes Fred off the ball, lets the entire defense has to compensate for that and slide, and that obviously leaves space open in the midfield. And as I said in our preview, I felt like the center defensive midfielder position was going to let Manchester United down this season. And we're still in October, and every United fan and even non-United fans are seeing how big of a weakness that area is compared to other top teams in Europe.
I mean, even for me, just watching this team at the very beginning, it was pretty hot. Like, this is a team where it's like, oh, they're in title contentions now, all of a sudden, with Ronaldo coming in. And now, fast forward to basically a month later, now it's just been a streak of dropping points, a few losses, and some question marks around Ole Gunnar Solskjær and his managing. And I'm just wondering, it's like, where did it all go wrong? It's just like, it looked like everything was all right. Like, it looked like although McFred was still there, everything else around it was good enough to kind of like cover up for it. Where it's like, all right, we have to like this one little Achilles heel, like, what's it called? Like that,
The
like,
weak spot.
yeah, the weak spot. But I feel like it was working so far, but then it just really, the wheels came off the bus really quickly. And then, certain players got chucked into this game. I mean, granted, for your situation against Everton, there weren't some key players in this match. Like Lindelof came in for Harry Maguire, Harry Maguire was injured, and like Martial started after kind of being on the bench for a while, and then also Cavani came in for Ronaldo, obviously. But against against a weaker Everton side, it's like, I feel like Manchester United should be able to, play more than a draw, at least to this team. Like, at least try to get like a two goals in this game. But no, it's a
Yeah.
1-1. And then you had the
And the thing
vulnerability
is,
to let Townsend
eh,
come in and do the Ronaldo celebration in your stadium,
yeah,
man.
the thing is, we were in control of the game once, like going into the second half, and a little bit going into the second half. But, um, we were in control, and then that one counterattack just really let us down. And it's little moments like that where we have been in control, we have created chances, but we let, I guess, our concentration slip for that one little moment, and that's what lets the other team in, and that's ends up what ends up biting us in the back. And I know a lot of question marks have been pointed at Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and I have myself have pointed those question marks as well. Because if you listen to this podcast, we started doing this when Jose Mourinho was in his final season, and when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer came in as interim coach, and then when that next season where he was struggling a lot. I have been a big supporter of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I haven't been on the bandwagon of, hey, one bad result, get him out of the club. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's just a PE teacher. No, I've been like, he needs time to kind of develop and, really kind of cycle out the dead wood at Manchester United and build his own team. And this summer, specifically, he's been backed a ton in terms of getting Ronaldo, Sancho, Varane. And with that, I know these are three big superstars, and especially the likes of Ronaldo and Varane, and especially Ronaldo. I knew there was going to be a bit of an adjustment period because, of course, when you add a player like you've seen with PSG, with Lionel Messi, and with the likes of Cristiano Ronaldo, those amazing world class players, the best players of our generation, yeah, you're going to have to tailor and basically change up the way you play a little bit because there's no way Messi and Ronaldo are going to conform to the way you play. They're like, we've been playing this way for such a long time, and we've been at the height of our game playing this way that we're just going to continue playing our way, but the team has to adjust a little bit of that. And I think that's kind of been the crux of some of the problems in terms of, as you mentioned, some of the fluidity problems. Because if you watched our games against Leeds, Southampton, yeah, we drew against Southampton, and yeah, we didn't play our best against Wolves, but there was still kind of that same formula that was working from last season being transferred over this season. But since Ronaldo has come in, it's kind of changed up things a little bit. It's kind of what's the word? Shaking things up. And I guess it's down to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer now in terms of where he's at as a manager. How can he maximize and get the best results out of this team with the superstars in terms of the egos and everyone that we have on this team now? Where, like, this is where Solskjaer's man management and also his tactical analysis, just a manager, is going to really come into play. And I'm going to be very interested to see how this international break, how he's going to come out of this, because I think, as we joke about the international break, I think it did come at a really good time for Manchester United because I think they needed a break in terms of the coaching staff really needed a break to kind of really look at things as a whole and see where they can improve. And I'm going to be just very curious to see how we look coming out of this international break because it's rumored that Marcus Rashford can be eligible to start once again pretty soon, coming off his injury. I played it in an indoor exhibition match inside Old Trafford today and scored 2 goals. So him coming back, I think, will be a major boost because I think he offers a lot of um, different, I guess, a different aspect going forward than a lot of our other forwards. He's one forward that will always make those darting runs, will always, drag defenders out of place just because he always makes those runs in behind. And I think our team needs that. But I will say another bright spot out of this game, one of the few, was Jadon Sancho. He came on, I believe, in the last 25, 30 minutes, and he looked really bright. Probably the best I've seen of him in a Manchester United shirt. It kind of looked like the player we bought from Dortmund, getting past people, creating tons of chances. And I think the big thing was just he was really confident and he was kind of playing without, I would say the first couple games in his United career, he's been playing very shy and being very scared of, not making a mistake. But I think his cameo in this game, he just kind of let it all out and just played with no fear. And I think that's when we saw the best of Sancho. Um, but yeah, I think the international break came at a good time because I think the coaching staff for sure just need some time to kind of analyze and figure out what's the best plan going forward. Maybe that isn't playing all our best attacking players in one game. Maybe that means one of, a Greenwood or, wouldn't say Bruno, but maybe, he has to shake things up a little bit. Maybe we can't have all the best attackers all on one starting 11 and finding that consistent starting 11 in the league and just playing them. And yeah, it may make a couple people unhappy, but that's kind of the hard decisions you have to make as a manager, unfortunately.
Hmm. So they're kind of saying is like, man, if only we had a few more center midfielders or a few more kind of just creative players, and Rashford could kind of bring that dynamism into that team because he's also one of
Yeah.
the players that will take a player on and also drag a defender out of position. So
And he was a
maybe.
key player last season. He was one of our best consistent players. And I'm not saying in terms of like, oh, we need to assign another player, because we've seen teams win league titles, Champions League titles with deficiencies in their squad. I mean, with Chelsea, they didn't. I'm trying to think for Chelsea. They didn't really have an out and out consistent number nine. Timo Werner, Kai Havertz was basically the rotating number nine.
Mhm.
It's not like they had Romelu Lukaku back then. And I know for Liverpool, they had a couple other deficiencies when they won the Champions League. So it's not like you need to have the best overall every player in the starting 11. I just don't think that's possible. But I think as a manager, you have to figure out a way to make the most or maximize the potential out of every player. And I think for the most part, Solskjaer has been able to do that. And I think with Fred, he has been able to do that. But I think just with the overall quality of the squad, yeah, Fred was really good back then when the squad wasn't that good. But now that the squad overall, in terms of the players everywhere around us, are better, Fred and McTominay specifically need to raise up their game in terms of being more confident on the ball, making better decisions, and just being just overall more confident. And I think that has to come down to overall coaching, in terms of practice sessions and getting and training Fred and McTominay up to be able to handle that role.
Would you say like Fred and McTominay's ceilings haven't hit, or do you think they still have a little bit more room? Because I do know, at least for Fred, it looking like every time he plays, it's always like, oh, it's freaking Fred again.
Yeah,
It's,
Fred. I think Fred is definitely, especially with his age, I think Fred is now 28 or 29. He's definitely hit his ceiling. McTominay, I believe is 25. He's 24 right now, but he will be turning 25 soon. I feel like he still has a little bit. I feel like just a tad, like a little bit more he can improve on. But in terms of his, I guess, overall attributes as a player, I don't think that's really going to change, because I know a lot of pundits and a lot of people, when they talk about Manchester United, they're like, I want to see Manchester United playing a 4-3-3 with McTominay being the sole holding midfielder. But whenever I hear that, I'm like, have you guys watched United play? Because McTominay, he's not a holding midfielder. He is very much a combative box to box midfielder. He's the type of midfielder that will go run up and down the pitch like 90 minutes. He will give you his all, running up and down. He knows how to get himself in clever positions to potentially score a goal, being in the attacking third. But he's also, he can be strong enough to win the ball back and, kind of win the ball back for the team. But in terms of being that very disciplined center defensive mid, such as a Fabinho or a Rodri or a Casemiro, Conte, he's not really that type of player. He's not very disciplined enough to just sit by himself and just be comfortable with the other players going forward. And I know there's been reports that apparently Michael Carrick has been doing one-on-one training sessions with McTominay in terms of helping him improve his short passing and long passing to kind of develop to play in that defensive midfielder role. But I feel like that might be almost a waste of time. I know you always need to train, but I feel like McTominay is just the way he is the way he is. And unfortunately, I don't feel like that's going to change. I would like to see. I know Donny Van de Beek is naturally a center attacking midfielder, kind of in that Bruno Fernandes position. But my thinking is, why not? I guess in a sense, if we see Fred and McTominay not really working, why not add, maybe do McTominay and Donny Van de Beek, or McTominay and Fred, where at least I was going to say, at least with Donny Van de Beek, you have that confidence that he can pick out a ball. He's very confident, like in terms of doing short passes. He's got the accuracy, he's got the vision. That way, I guess in that sense, you're not going to just give away the ball cheaply in possession. You have someone that is very comfortable with the ball, can pass out the back, and can overall handle that pressure. But you know, it remains to be seen what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer kind of views Donny Van de Beek, because obviously right now it just seems like he's kind of in the gutter and can't get out of it right now.
he's very much a luxury pick, where it's like
Yeah.
they Manchester United bought Donny Van de Beek. It's like, all right, welcome to the bench. It's like we barely see him play. I'm upset too, because like as a Liverpool fan, I was like, man, he's been pretty good on Liverpool, but he ultimately chose. I mean, I'm not sure if he chose it, but ultimately Manchester United pay more money to Ajax. But I feel like he is the word underutilized is a bit of an understatement, but he just needs to get some minutes, and there's got to be a way to like shoehorn him in to the squad at least to
Hmm.
at least change it up. Because as you said, this team, if they had just a slightly different kind of player come in, just not all, strikers, wingers, maybe put a midfielder in there or something. Donny Van de Beek's literally looking at right into the lens. It's just like, hello, I'm still
Yeah.
here.
And I feel like, maybe he's not the solution, but I at least would like to see it, give it a go and see what happens because Solskjaer definitely puts a lot of faith in the McFred, partnership. And I know we have Nemanja Matic on the bench, but this is not Nemanja Matic from 5 years ago. This is a very old Nemanja Matic who can't really get across the pitch. And yeah, he has those defensive midfielder capabilities, but in terms of actually performing them, he's not really, can't really do that consistently anymore. But I would like to hear from, I guess, like an outsider perspective. What do you think United should do for that? I guess that holding midfielder position, or how they should structure their starting 11, because they have all these great players, but now it's just how do you get the best and most use out of them?
Well, I'd say like Manchester United usually do like a 4-2-3-1 formation as like their
Yeah,
default formation.
that's Solskjaer. That's Solskjaer's preferred type of formation.
And maybe at times, like I've seen historically in the past, like sometimes, like when Klopp first started, he didn't do his like 4-3-3 immediately. It was more like, all right, we have these chess pieces, we have these players. Why don't we just play a position or a formation that kind of suits the positions of these players more to kind of bring out the most in them? So I believe at times even you saw Klopp do like a 4-2-3-1 as well. And for this scenario, maybe just to even bring like a Donny Van de Beek in, or to help Matic kind of be in that role where he doesn't have to run around as much. Maybe change up the formation. It's one of those simple solutions where it's like, all right, and then also kind of gives the other managers that are about to face Manchester United something to think about. Where it's like, are they going to come back with a classic 4-2-3-1 and they just set up for that, or are they going to be like something crazy and it's going to be like a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-2-2 or a 4-4-2, something, or even like a three in the back. You never know, but having like a different formation potentially can bring out the most in different players. It could ultimately hurt some players too, because like a player like Bruno Fernandez is clearly excelling in this formation and clearly excelling in the role he's playing.
Hmm.
But kind of changing up the formation and having different roles appear and having different players play in those roles could help. But at the same time, Ole Gunnar has been in this situation. He's been in this manager
Hot
role
seat.
for like 3 seasons now, 4 seasons soon, but
Three and a
is
half. I
yeah, three and a
Yeah, three
half.
and a half.
And it's like, does he have the flexibility to be making those kind of risks? Because like right now, it's like this very low risk kind of situation to be like, all right, 4-2-3-1 once again. Let's just kind of fit these people into, we need two CDMs. All right, McFred, I guess. Once again, not really that many options.
And the
So
thing that hurts, I hate when they play McFred because then basically they play a diamond in midfield where it pushes Paul Pogba basically as a left winger or a left midfielder, and it's
mhm.
like that's not how you get the best out of Paul Pogba playing him on the left side. You need him to be playing in the central, side of the park, but that obviously you can only play him there when you have the confidence that you have one person that can handle the business in terms of being that sweeper. And the fact that they don't have it, that's why we've seen the defense kind of leak goals because the likes of Rafael Varane, Harry Maguire, Victor Lindelof, Wan Bissaka, Luke Shaw, they all have to cover for the fact that maybe our midfielders don't win the ball back. And because of that, that leaves up a lot of space. And I will say David De Gea has been really, really good. It's almost like he's returned back to that prime De Gea form where he's making insane saves almost every game. And that's awesome. And I'm so happy that he's back in terms of being in that top form. But it's also a little worrying now that he has to constantly make those world class saves every single game to keep United in the match. And that's a little worrying as well. And one last point I wanted to mention about United, I guess before we move on, was the like of Cristiano Ronaldo. I know we mentioned him before, but I mentioned that the team and also the coaching staff need to adapt to his ability in terms of what he does on the pitch. And I think it's been fairly evident the way we see him play is that he is not the type of player that if he loses the ball, he's not going to try to win it back immediately, or he's not the type of player that's going to try to run or chase down the goalkeeper to, chase a loose ball. And because of that, that kind of leaves that responsibility on the likes of Bruno Fernandes, the wingers, to kind of help out with that role. But I know a lot of people have been talking maybe play a 4-4-2 where you have maybe Cavani alongside Ronaldo, where Cavani is much different, where he's willing to track down and chase runners, or maybe you play Mason Greenwood in a front two, someone that is willing to kind of make those runs so that Ronaldo has that space to kind of do what he does and, be the world class player that he is. So the little things like that where, Ronaldo is not going to do that. And I guess United fans and the manager have to get used to the fact that this is Cristiano Ronaldo. He's just unfortunately just not going to chase down loose balls for you and, exert his energy, because obviously we've seen when he uses his energy for the offensive side, he can do great things on the ball.
I mean, he's also like 35 years old. He's like,
Yeah.
he can't be running around the whole game. So
Hmm.
gonna have to use his stamina sparingly. But at
Yeah.
the same time, like that's kind of how Cristiano Ronaldo has always been. He's not gonna be like a Jamie Vardy who's just gonna
Yeah.
chase down everything.
Yeah.
Ronaldo's gonna be like, all right, I'm here to finish whatever you serve me, or just juke out another player of a step over if you hand me the ball. So this kind of like how he is. So you know,
Yeah, I remember. I guess last thing. Gary Neville on his podcast, he said that even in 2008, when Ronaldo was like 26, he was the same way. Where Sir Alex Ferguson had the likes of Wayne Rooney, Ji Sung Park, Carlos Tevez, all covering for the fact that Ronaldo um, didn't do that. He didn't backtrack. He didn't win the ball back. He was just kind of there to just be that offensive playmaker. And he said that at times they would just stick Ronaldo as a striker, then have all the other players do the dirty work so they could just feed Ronaldo and give him all the goals. And if he was like that in 2008, he's the same way now. So it's all about, can Solskjaer adapt the system to kind of get the best out of every player, and that's where managers make their money. So we got to see if Solskjaer is up for it. So
man, Ronaldo's been conditioned as a boy to do the same things. If only he had someone to yell at him to be like, "Hey, why didn't you chase that down?" Or maybe he still just didn't listen. I don't know. But I mean,
yeah,
regardless, he's still literally one of the best of all time.
yeah.
So I
So
mean,
he got the way
yeah,
he was, like just doing what he does. So
hmm
it is what it is. But there definitely are, you know, not as bleak as I'm making it out to seem. There's definitely a lot of positives for Manchester United, but right now not looking too hot. And a 1-1 draw against Everton. But we wanted to quickly mention Wolves versus Newcastle, purely on the fact that Hwang Hee Chan scored a brace, and I believe this is his fourth or third goal overall in the Premier League, because he scored on his debut, I believe.
hmm
But yeah, he scored a brace against Newcastle, and he's kind of been lighting up and been helping goals out a lot, especially with Raul Jimenez not really providing the goals since coming back from the skull fracture.
already scored 3 more goals this season than he did last season for the Bundesliga.
Yeah.
So I mean, my cousin's doing pretty well, and he's one of the few players so far this season that's gotten a brace. So I believe it's only like 7 or 8 players that gotten a brace this season, which is 2 goals. But I mean, that's some big things for Wolves, not only because it gives a little bit of relief for Raul Jimenez to not have to carry the team, but also gives some hope that there actually is a second striker for Wolves, because before
Yeah.
they brought in
Fabio
Fabio
Silva.
Silva for like 50
The
million
18-year-old Portugal kid from
from
Portugal.
Porto, and like he, I don't know who he was coming into Wolves. I still don't really know what he can do, because from what I've seen is like he's a very average player. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I know he's like 18, 19, but it still is. You at least see some
He's
glimpses. Like
not João Felix.
he's not Joao Felix, where he's like from the eye test, it's like, all right, he's probably gonna be like, Joao Felix. We already see him as like, oh, he could be like a Kaká, or he could be potentially world class, just giving his touches, his ability just to run with the ball and score and create those chances. Whereas for Fabio Silva, it's like this boy, he's like, it's
It's
like
just some skinny guy.
he's just some Did they just buy him just because he's young and Portuguese? It's like, what's going on? So I think for Wolves, at least, this is a pretty good boost for them, because we always kind of painted them as like a solid mid-table team ever since they came into the league, and kind of shocked everyone. It's like, oh, they can actually perform and kind of stay amongst the big boys in the mid-table against like West Ham, Leicester, and Everton. But I mean, since the unfortunate skull fracture with Raul Jimenez, they've kind of been on the decline and just trying to like survive at this point. But having
Mhm.
Hwang Hee Chan there and having his career slightly get revitalized from just being in the squad and scoring those goals here and there, I think it's going to be beneficial for both of them. So this is just a storyline to kind of keep track of as the season goes on. But big result against a Newcastle side that's definitely kind of be facing off against them with this relegation kind of situation right now, because Newcastle, they're down there. They're always in the talks of that relegation battle. Right now sitting at
Yeah.
19th, but Wolves luckily kind of moving their way up to 12th.
Yeah, so it's good to see Hwang Hee Chan out there and doing one. I think Son also scored this weekend too. So good weekend for the Asian crowd in the Premier League. Good to see the South Koreans doing well.
Love to
But
see it.
yeah, love to see it. And then finally we have some exciting news. Leicester City's historical, probably will go down as probably one of the best managers of Premier League history, just purely on the fact that he won a Premier League title with Leicester. Claudio Ranieri has been hired by Watford after Watford sacked their manager, not even making it to November. Already sacked him in October. But they have brought in Claudio Ranieri. He's back in the Premier League. If you forgot, it was funny. The first season we actually did the podcast, Claudio Ranieri actually came back to the Premier League with Fulham. Unfortunately, the job didn't work out. Fulham ended up getting relegated with Ranieri, or they sacked him maybe four games before getting relegated. But Watford have pulled the trigger and have hired Claudio Ranieri, so it's good to see him back in the Premier League. Hopefully, he can rekindle some of that magic from that 2015-16 season for Watford.
I don't really know if he has the same firepower and ammo though. This Arsenal at Watford definitely not the same that he had in a Leicester squad, because I mean, if you
Mm-hmm.
think about it, he did have Mahrez, Conte, a
Tay,
prime Vardy. So I will say there should be a bet we should take for this one. Will Claudio Ranieri be sacked before Christmas, or do you think he'll survive after Christmas?
dang, Christmas, man! You're only giving him like a solid month, 2 months, right? 2 months.
Because Watford have the propensity to just pull the trigger and just
Yeah.
fire managers willy nilly. Because I believe the last time they're in the Premier League, they went through 3 or 4 managers
It was
in
great.
that
They
final
brought back
season.
the manager that was there with them when they first got promoted to the Premier League, and they
And
fired
then,
him after a month or something like that.
so okay, maybe Christmas is a little too soon. All right, let's make a more conservative one. Let's say, will he last the entire season?
That's that's tough. I really want to see Claudio Ranieri do good, but I'm gonna lead towards no, just purely on the fact that Watford just don't not like they don't care about the pedigree or what you've done for the club. They're just like, if you're not performing, you're out. Um, because they had Nigel Pearson, they fired him too before
Mm-hmm.
4 games before deciding that, and obviously Nigel Pearson was at Leicester City before Claudio Ranieri took over. So I don't think he'll last, unfortunately. I just think purely based on Watford's track record, they'll probably fire him.
I also agree with you, and I picked Christmas just because I was thinking that's probably when they would consider firing the
They already
manager.
start the board meetings right there.
It's like literally we're recording on October 6th, and I believe if Ranieri can't get them out of this relegation area, like right now they're sitting in 15th, and that the previous manager already got fired, and they're not even in that relegation like pit right now of 18, 19, and 20th. So I feel like if Ranieri doesn't make any progress, if he's not above the mid-table, which I really don't see Watford doing, I think he'll probably get sacked then. It's like, oh, it's clearly not the players, it's probably the manager. So if he can't do it, someone else can. So that's probably why I see him probably getting the boot sooner than later, unfortunately. And also just for the irony is that, Claudio Ranieri, he had this classic 4-4-2 that he
Yeah.
ran at Leicester that was like basically the staple of every single game. It's kind of like Solskjær, where it's like, all right, every game would be a 4-2-3-1 for Solskjær, but for Ranieri, it was always a 4-4-2.
Hmm.
And from what I read too, that this is not actually kind of his style, where apparently he was kind of known for being a manager that changes the formation like way too much, to the point where like the players are like, what are we doing this week? Like we don't even know till like the game is like, all right, I guess we're doing a 4-3-3 this game. And then like the next game is like, oh, we're doing a 4-5-1. It's a lot of formation talk in this podcast this week, but Ranieri, we're gonna see if he's gonna be, kind of be back to his Leicester roots, where it's like, all right, he found like a certain formation that he kind of likes and certain players he wants to just stick in every single week and have a consistency, which seemed to work at Leicester for sure for at least that season. Success is kind of an understatement, but
Hmm.
I would say for this, that's going to be like the big talk of how he's going to do at Watford. Is like, is he going to have the right players to do what he wants in terms of tactics and the way to grab results and to grab points, or is he just going to be a jumbled mess and just kind of be trying every single week? And I feel like low key is probably going to be the latter. So,
Yeah, you
congratulations,
can't.
Ranieri, back in the Premier League with Watford. But wouldn't be surprised if in 3 months it's like, all right, Ranieri, he's out.
Man, it's unfortunate because I feel like if you're a Watford player, why do you want to continue being like a player at this club? Because like how do you even have fun constantly having to change and adapt your play style to different managers every time?
Feel like you'd have trust issues being a Watford player. Just be like, man, managers keep leaving. They're like, every single time there's like a team talk with the managers, like, all right, this is the season. We're going to change everything. 3 months later, new manager, same speech. All right, new manager. We're going to have a new system. Everything's going to work. And then 3 months later, another team talk with a new manager. It's like,
It just
literally, I don't know.
repeats.
It just,
Horrible.
the cycle repeats. And then, Ismail Assar just sitting there like, man, Watford's a rough place. England's a rough place.
He's good though, man. That's the
And Troy
problem.
Deeney's, looking
He's
down
gone.
from
Birmingham
the
City.
heavens like first time.
Oh man, but wishing the best of luck to Claudio Ranieri. Unfortunately, we both believe that his time back in the Premier League won't end too well. But hey, he, um, he can shock anyone. If he can shock anyone, he can do it again. If he shocked it with Leicester, he can shock the world again. So
Hmm.
we'll see what ends up happening with Watford and Claudio Ranieri. But with that, that kind of wraps up the episode 127 for us. Interesting one here because next week I know we mentioned that we were recording this actually on the first week of the international break. Next week, when we record, obviously the Premier League season will be kicking back on, and so will the leagues. But we wanted to ask the question to all of you if you had any interesting topics or any interested soccer related topics. Doesn't necessarily even have to be related towards in game stuff. Anything you find interesting, like whether it be like FIFA or kits or cleats or anything you can think of that's soccer related that you'd find interesting and would want us to talk about. We'd love to hear any comments or suggestions for next week's episode because it'd be a great time to do it just because with the international break and kind of a lull in the league soccer schedule kind of gives us some time to do some of those more fun evergreen topics. So anything you have, we'd love to hear about them in the comments below or just shooting us a message on our social media platforms at the Premier Pod on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to shoot us a comment on YouTube, that's also great too on at the Premier Pod on the YouTube channel. And after that, if you, as we always say, if you want to rate, give us a rating on Apple Podcasts. That helps us out a lot too, or leaving us a review on there helps us get noticed and helps get the podcast out and pushed out to more people. But as we always say, just taking a listen, taking your time to listen, and sharing that with any of your other friends that are interested in soccer or the Premier League, that's more than enough, and we do value that. Any support we get, we value. So, thank you guys once again for listening. We appreciate it. And yeah, that kind of wraps up season 4, episode 127 for us. Peace.
Peace.